grandparents. Who were they? Aziel Smith, an odd name. Okay, and Solomon Mack. Which one was accident prone? Solomon Mack. Okay. So, all right. We're now going to go to the parents. You can probably imagine that as it gets closer to the birth of Joseph, that gifts of the Spirit would be much more prevalent. Would we all say that? So you start with John Lathrop. We get closer. Joseph's actually going to grow up in their home. Obviously, they've got to be prepared. I'm now going to talk about Joseph Smith Sr. and his wife, Lucy Mack Smith. And then we'll talk gifts of the Spirit. And then I'm going to back up, and I need to get those two falling in love. So we need a momentary romance, especially at these islands. So, all right, here goes. For Joseph Smith Sr., the gift of the Spirit that he enjoyed, he described it as visions, and we probably describe it as revelatory dreams. Before young Joseph ever had his first vision, Joseph Smith Sr. claimed he had 7 visions. Now, where can you find most of those? There's a book called The History of Joseph Smith by his mother, and Lucy Mack Smith, and you can find some of those visions in it. Now, I would describe them more like revelatory dreams, because in each one, Joseph Smith Sr. is asleep, and in each one, he has a dream in which he always sees a messenger dressed in white. And the messenger dressed in white takes him somewhere and shows him something, and then they have this like dialogue back and forth. Now, I'm only going to share 2 of the dreams, and then you're going to see some real similarities coming down to Joseph Smith. Okay, in one of the dreams, Joseph Smith Sr. is at night, and suddenly he's asleep, and he's dreaming, and a messenger dressed in what? White. Is now there in his dream. He describes that the messenger dressed in white takes him to a very low but pleasant valley, in which he's now looking down at the valley, and he sees a what? Tree. Okay, does this sound like 1 Nephi 8? He sees a tree. And then Joseph Smith Sr., he's pretty curious about this tree in the valley, and he gets down, he wants to get to the tree, but how he can get to it, he sees a rope running about as high as a man can reach. In other words, we would call it from Scripture a what?
Iron rod.
Okay, iron rod. And, so it's not like you just bump into it. Oops, yep, you're still there. Oh, let me walk away, boom. Okay, he sees it about as high as a man can reach. So Joseph Smith Sr. describes, he finally gets down to the tree, and as he's staring at the tree, it has a kind of fruit, but they're covered by a shell. And in his mind, it looks like a chestnut bird. He says the shell begins to commence opening and reveals a fruit of what color? White. Oh, well, Joseph Smith Sr. has never seen this. He's been a farmer all the days of his life. He now looks at this white fruit. He goes over, he starts to eat it, and he finds it to be what?
Most delicious.
Most delicious. Good. Okay, he's so excited about it, he concludes he wants to tell his family about it. And that Laman and Lemuel, no matter, what he's going to do, they're not going to come to the tree like Nephi and Sam. But in the case of Joseph Smith Sr., here comes his wife Lucy, and here comes all the children. And he said, we started to eat of the fruit. And then pretty soon he said, we began to feast on the fruit. In other words, feasting is so much different than the snack, the lunch. Feasting, I try not to do that every night, okay? You try to save it for Thanksgiving, something, okay. But he says, we began to feast on it. And he says, pretty soon we're picking it up in double handfuls. We're like, we can't get enough of this. And suddenly he's awake. Okay, how does this relate to young Joseph? I think we've already done that, Book of Mormon. Okay, another one. And actually, this one goes like this. Joseph Smith Sr. is asleep. He's about to have a dream. And he always knows it's this inspired dream because it's always this messenger dressed in white comes to see him. And the messenger dressed in white, this time, he takes him to a place where there is a box. And Joseph Smith Sr., they're about to have a dialogue. And he's very curious. He wants to see the contents of the box. And the messenger says, oh, it's not time yet. And Joseph Sr. says, well, then tell me about it. Among other things he says, inside here is the fullness of the gospel. Okay, let me come to young Joseph. Remember, it's 1823. Joseph Smith's been up all night, September 21st, 22nd, talking to who? Angel Moroni. What's Angel Moroni wearing? Okay, he's wearing white. And Angel Moroni tells him about several things, including there's a Urim and Thummim, there's a book, and the box, there's a hill, and okay, now it's the next morning. Next morning, the cock has crowed, much like today, and suddenly Joseph Smith Jr. is going out to help Dad, whose dad's a farmer. As he's helping Dad, Dad says, oh, son, basically, you don't look so good, go home. He's crossing over like a little fence in the fields. He crosses over. Suddenly, here's the angel again, and he repeats what he has the night before, but he adds what? Go tell who? Go tell your father. So, okay, momentary role play, because we don't have the dialogue. Hey, Dad, I'm back. Son, you look worse than you did before. You were supposed to go home. Oh, Dad, could you put down your hoe, your sickle? I'm just trying to talk to you. Okay, son, what is it? Well, last night a messenger came to see me. Really? What was he wearing? Well, okay, what'd you learn? Well, among other things, Dad, they're about 3 miles from here. There is a hill and there's a box. And, okay, notice we don't have the dialogue, but we get Joseph's reaction. He now hurries to the hill. He gets a lever. He now takes it off. He can see the contents of the box, but here comes the angel again. What does he say? Not time yet. In other words, it's still not time. Okay, tell me, was Dad being prepared for a son to be the prophet of the restoration? Okay, can you see that? How do you prepare these people? And you'd say, well, not in the wealth, for sure not. You'd say, wealth is in the gifts of the Spirit. Now, for Lucy Mack Smith, we know more of her gifts of the Spirit than we do of her husband's.
But these dreams of Joseph Smith Sr., would he have told his family, or is it more?
Okay, so the question is, would Joseph Smith Sr. have told his family?
Lucy Mack knew, apparently.
Yeah, Lucy Mack knew, and if it's kind of like, my husband, when we get up, he goes, I had a dream last night. And, we'll talk about it. So I would imagine if it's a, quote, inspired dream, although we don't have the writings of Joseph Smith Sr. on this, but just his wife. But I would imagine, so it's an assumption. Okay, for Lucy, we know more of her gifts of the Spirit, and the reason is she's a writer. And a subliminal message just went out. Okay. So she is your writer, and notice she writes the history of Joseph Smith, but a third of it is about her. And, so it's a little misnomer. I'm going to write the history of my son, and oops, did I say I'm going to be everywhere. Okay, as she does so, she describes her gifts of the Spirit, and I'm only going to do 2, so you can see how they varied from other family members. Okay, one gift of the Spirit. Lucy Mack Smith is a young married woman. One time she's extremely ill. She's so ill that doctors are called for. A doctor comes in, checks her out, and his assumption is she will die. Joseph Smith Sr., he now rushes into the room to tell his wife, and notice no counseling skills, as he now says, Lucy, my dear wife, you must die. And you're like, oh, yeah, you could have said that better. Okay, Lucy now is becoming angry at her young husband, and she tells him to leave the room. Lucy then begins to plead with the Lord, and she said, I made a covenant with God. Notice, we don't have priesthood yet, but she says, I made a covenant with God that if he would let me live, that, basically I'm still going to love my husband, raise my children to love the Lord. And she then describes, she hears a voice. And the voice says, quotes scriptures, seek and ye shall find, knock and it shall be open unto you. So you'd say, wow, Lucy, what do you got going for you? You're not just thinking, hey, I think I have the right answer. She hears voices. Another experience of Lucy's that she describes that during the Palmyra time, that she's now read enough in the Bible to know that you're not going to get to heaven unless you've been baptized. And her husband, Joseph Smith Sr., has not been baptized. And she begins telling him, I think you should be baptized. And he doesn't want to be. And, well, okay, you realize there's a fine line between saying something twice and nagging. And I can actually pass that one really quick. Okay. And apparently, it appears that Lucy could do the same. And finally, he keeps saying no, no. And she actually goes into the main street in Palmyra, and she talks to a preacher. And she says, will you baptize my husband if he never comes to church? And the preacher says yes, but Joseph Smith Sr. still says no. Okay. Lucy now goes out into the woods to pray by her house, and she wants to soften the heart of her husband, and she claims that she always gets answers out in this kind of wooded area of her home, but she gets no answers on this occasion. And so she comes home, and that night she has a dream, and then she gets an interpretation of the dream. In the dream, she sees two beautiful trees. In my mind, being here, they have to be palm trees. Okay, but who knows? Okay. She sees two beautiful trees. And she sees a brook kind of going past, and okay. And she says the trees were identical to each other. I mean, they were symmetrical. They looked exactly alike. But then she says, suddenly the wind began to blow. And as it began to blow, one tree became like marble, like granite. You know, even the leaves on it wouldn't enjoy the wind. It's rigid. The other tree, however, as the wind begins to blow, it enjoys it. Pretty soon it's kind of lapping over, picking up the brook that's going by. It eventually gets this beautiful white base, white light around its base, and suddenly the dream is over. Now, you realize if I had had a dream about trees, I would have said, what's up trees? It must have been something I ate. Never dream trees. I'm always running. Okay. And, it's trees. Well, okay, Lucy now asks for an interpretation. The interpretation goes like this. Do you see the two trees that were alike? It's your husband and his brother. His brother is a minister, and you think he's so great. Do you see the wind? The wind's the true gospel. When the true gospel is upon the earth, that brother you think is so great, wow, he's going to be rigid. But you see the other tree? The other tree is bending over. It's picking up the brook that's going past. It's got that beautiful white base. That's your husband. When the true gospel is upon the earth, he will accept it. In other words, wife, back off. Give him a chance. He's going to be there. He's just not going to be there right now. Okay. So notice what we picked up. John Lazarus, what was his gift of the Spirit? Okay, integrity, authority to act in the name of God is not upon the earth. What was the gift of the Spirit of JosephSmith? Revelations. What's the gift of the Spirit of Solomon Mack? Okay. Accident prone. That's all. Okay. Okay, sees pillar of light. Here's his name. Good. Gift of the Spirit of Joseph Smith Sr. Okay, revelation. And you'd say dreams, kind of visions. Lucy Mack Smith. Here's words. Dreams. Interpretation of dreams. Okay. We're now going to get the Smiths falling in love. We're going to get them married. And then start to have children. Okay. All right, I think I can do this. Everybody got this? Questions on this? Okay, everybody, we're good. All right, so we've got to get Joseph Smith Sr. falling in love with Lucy. Okay, Lucy at the time was living in a place called Tunbridge, Vermont. Okay, and she is now living with her brother. And as she's living with her brother, she is working at his general store, which you'd say, kind of Foodland, Ace Hardware, you push them all together, and she works there, and she's the girl behind the counter. Coming to shop at the store is Joseph Smith Sr. Joseph Smith Sr. at the time is financially well-to-do. He is a farmer, and he actually owns 100 acres. Now, it's viewed at that time, if you owned 100 acres, You could marry, you could have children, you could have a normal life, but 1 acre less would be too little of acreage. So suddenly you would describe him as a very, very eligible bachelor. So tell me, does it matter where you shop?
Yes.
Okay, so for all of you men, if you find her in the mall, high maintenance is yours forever. Which is it, you know, if you were to find her at a Bishop Storehouse or Deseret Industries, you will be blessed all the days of your life. Well, okay. So it was a shopping experience that they find each other. They will fall in love, and when they marry, Lucy actually receives from her brother, remember she's working at the general store, and his partner, she receives $1,000. So for all of you that got married and your brother or sister, you know, only kicked in, you know, here's a dish towel, here's a pots and pans, you know, you need to say you need to step this up, because have you not noticed, 19th century, $1,000 came forward to the Smiths. Okay. Lucy and Joseph Smith Sr. are married, and they move on to his farm in a place called what? Tunbridge, hard to say, Tunbridge, Vermont. Okay. As they move on the farm to Tunbridge, suddenly you get children being born. First living child of the Smiths, anybody name him? Okay, Alvin. Okay.
He's a beautiful man, wasn't he?
Right. In other words, Joseph Smith said of Alvin after his death that Alvin was the most handsomest man he had ever seen next to Seth and Adam. So for years, I actually held out for Alvin Smith. I go, I know that. I don't think anybody else knows that. I'm going to hold out for Alvin. The next life I'm going to get him. And then, you know, and then here comes along Harvey Black, and I hope I didn't settle. You know, so, you know, okay. So Alvin Smith, very, very handsome. He's firstborn son. Okay, next child is Hiram Smith, a man we've already talked about, who's 6 years older than Joseph.